cinematographer and a proud board member at Retroformat Silent Films. Tonight, I'm very excited to be speaking to Paul Dooley, a man with over 200 film and TV credits to his name. Before he appeared in recurring roles on TV shows like My So-Called Life and Deep Space Nine, and before he starred in feature films like Breaking Away, directed by Peter Yates, or in other films directed by the likes of Robert Altman and Christopher Guest, Paul had the very special opportunity to meet and work with none other than Buster Keaton. We'll get to that in a little bit, but first, let me just say, Paul, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So as I mentioned, you did get to meet Buster in the 60s, but before we talk about that, could you just tell me what Buster and silent comedians like him meant to you, maybe as a teenager, as a young man? You know, I read that he was a personal hero of yours. Is that true?
More than just an actor or a great comedian, I somehow identified with him so much. I was 15. I grew up during the Depression. I saw very few movies with sound, only one or two. And I didn't know when silent movies ended and sound movies began. I was, 15. I still didn't know. Little town in West Virginia. A friend of mine in high school who was a year older and much more sophisticated took me to his house and showed me on an 8mm projector and screen his collection of silent movies, which he'd rented from Black Hawk. And here I discovered Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin, and eventually Lloyd and Langdon and all the others. And although I admired Chaplin from afar as a genius, he felt like above me somehow, too smart for me, too smart for the audience. He was a pretty smart guy. Whereas Buster seemed like an average guy with a lot of talent, a lot of pantomime skills. And somehow I felt I could know, or maybe I once knew Buster Keaton. It had a very strong impression on me, over and above his great talents and his acrobatics. And what people don't notice about him is not just that he falls down and gets back up, but he's a really, really good actor. You know, he can act beautifully, silently.
Yeah.
And that's what hooked me. And my friend and I began making little 2-minute, 3-minute shows with custard pies and derbies and top hats and canes from the Salvation Army. And we did it all through high school and college, and then even in New York. One of them is on Rockaway Beach in Brooklyn, called Trouble at the Beach, okay, which you may have a little copy of.
Yes, I do. And actually, I was just about to say, let's give our viewers a glimpse of that film. Did you direct that film also, Paul?
Yeah, I wrote. Doesn't feel like writing, but I wrote it. We shot it with one take only on every scene in continuity. So that's how we did it. We hardly knew you could do it backwards and forwards. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let's pick. great. I love those wide shots, you know, where you have you coming in and out of frame.
Yeah.
Obviously,
I had somehow read about the zigzag rally so that the person closest to the camera didn't get in the way of the people behind him. So they had to do it this way. Always. They did a zigzag rally so you could follow the people. No one would be obscured by the person closer to the camera.
I
So
see.
even at that early time, I was using that.
Well, you have, obviously you got kind of a Keystone chase in there. You got a custard pie in the face. Were those all actor friends of yours in the film?
They were all people who had graduated college with me and then went to New York to become actors. Some did, some didn't, some had a career, some didn't. But all of those people in it were kind of people I knew in college.
And where did you
The
film?
Bathing Beauty was my wife, my first wife, who came out there.
I see.
And my friend playing the heavy was very much like Max Swain and those people, kind of a heavyweight guy who would always be the bad guy. But he really had a great feeling for that style. It was really terrific.
Yeah, he definitely stood out. He looked like he belonged in that era for sure.
Yeah. Anyway,
so
there was all that stuff. And cut to 35 years later, after I'd done tons of commercials, I was very successful being a wasp who was perfect for every commercial. The guy who sold it, the guy who bought it, his neighbor, I could play any part. I did many, hundreds of on-camera commercials. And one day I heard about a commercial to be done in the style of a silent movie. This was never done, but I finally tracked down the producer at the agency, took a silent film with me. That was the one, Trouble at the Beach, and a lot of stills. And I said, please let me be in this movie. You know, I was born to play a Keystone Cop. And so I got that part, and that was the Ford commercial. And we spent 2 days shooting, so I was with him a little bit. You won't be able to tell me from any other Keystone Cop, but there I was.
are you the fella that gets bopped on the head?
No, I think that might have been an actor named Avery Schreiber.
Gotcha.
Who was a Second City guy and a friend of mine. Also, Barney Martin, who played Seinfeld's dad, he was a Keystone Cop.
Oh, you know what? I think it was him who gets bopped on the head.
It might have been.
Yeah, because he looked so familiar.
He's a little bulky.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that was.
Okay. Yeah. Let's take a look. And there's the custard pie again and the Keystone Cops again.
That was Barney Martin.
Yeah.
That was the guy.
So tell me, what was that like? You're going to set, you know that Buster's going to be there. What are you thinking that day as you're going to set, and what did you finally feel when you finally got to speak to him?
Well, I was beside myself with excitement. Here, it's like meeting God in some way, you know, to a person who was idolized him so much. But I was so shy in that respect, and I so much respected his privacy, and everyone sort of stayed away from him. Maybe the producer had suggested we don't bug him. First of all, he might have been 70 or 75, I don't remember. But I watched him, and often between takes, even if it was 5 or 10 minutes, we were outside, he would lie down on the grass with his flat hat over his face and probably take a cat nap. But I didn't want to bother him much. But at the end of the day, I came to him and I said, I have a lot of pictures of you at home, and I have your book, My Wonderful World of Slapstick. If I were to bring them tomorrow, would you sign them for me? And he said, sure. That's all. And I did a one-man show later and talked a lot about him. And I said, the only word I had ever heard him speak. Sure. So he did sign a picture, which I would like to show you.
Yeah,
it's not from a silent, it's from one of the MGM pictures. I forget the name of it. But
yeah. Oh, that's lovely. Oh, yeah.
But the picture is very vintage looking, and he's hanging as if he had been in a parachute. It looks like a between takes shot. His hand is resting on a table, which would only happen, not in the scene, and the guide wires some parachuter like this, and he's always had this great way of composing a picture. And instead of signing his name horizontally, he did it diagonally, and it looked like it matched the strings from the parachute.
Yeah.
And they always talk about his composition. He'll be in the tiny left corner of the frame, and the rest of it is a train. He didn't always put himself in the middle of a frame.
Right.
Often he did something which is very modern to off-center himself. But this picture had a canvas in the background. It was sort of painted like clouds. And I kept it in an envelope in a file for many years. And then I saw in a frame shop a mat that had clouds on it. It was a suede mat, but it looked like it had clouds in it. Then I found a frame that looked like it was fake marble. And only then did I want to put it in a frame, because I wanted it to look like it had been framed in those days. I've always loved framing pictures because I was an artist at some point, and I studied art, and I was a cartoonist, and I have an eye for, framing pictures. And I always like to give a lot of attention to what the picture says and what the frame says.
I enjoy framing pictures also. I guess it's the filmmaker in us.
Yeah, it's certainly, and you know all about framing, but he was pretty darn ahead of his time about framing and about the cinematic things. He even invented stuff, as we know. Sure. There was once a film where he got out of a car 6 times, the same him, the same Buster. And obviously he had used mats and closed off parts of the lens.
Right.
So he did a lot of things Chaplin never did, because he's so mechanical and he understood the camera. Although Chaplin invented something, I believe, where he didn't want to do the train station, so the train itself, in his film, A Woman in Paris, one he directed and did not appear in. You saw the train station and people standing there, and with light, he made it look like the train is passing with the shadowing,
Right.
Which they still do in films. They do, like, they find a way to make you think something's happening out of picture. But they were both pretty innovative, but Buster more so.
Well, speaking of that, his innovation, is there any film of his, both maybe a short film and a feature film? Maybe you can let us know what your favorites are, if you can choose a favorite. I know that's difficult.
Well, everyone talks about the general, but in a way, joke for joke, laugh for laugh, I think Steamboat Bill, and we talked before, what's the name of the guy?
You and I spoke before about
Sherlock Jr.
Sherlock Jr. Yeah.
Sherlock Jr. is really full of funny things. And did a lot of great effects, like diving through a window and coming out in a dress. There's a lot of stuff in that film. Those are 2 of my favorites in terms of laughs and everything. Yeah. Although everything it did has got great moments in it,
I've always been impressed by the pace of Sherlock Jr. It's one reason I show that film to people who may not be familiar with silent films, because the pace is so quick and the energy is so frenetic.
Yeah. And I love when he's running, then he gets a bike, and then gets a very tall bike, and then it's a motorcycle. Yeah, I think that's Sherlock Jr. I'm not
Oh
sure.
yeah, and there's a bit in there where he's driving the car and it turns into a boat because the wheels come off, and then they're in the boat, and then he uses the convertible canvas as a sail.
I think he understood gags almost better than anyone.
Yeah.
If we have a moment before we leave, I was looking through papers and things I have, and I found a CD that someone had given me, but I had never listened to it. And when I played it, it didn't have any name for the interviewer or the interviewee. But after a while, I figured out it was Keaton talking about his father. And I heard things I'd never heard before, or in any book. I've read all of the books. I don't think I ever read it before either.
Yeah.
But his father, before he was ever anything like in show business, he kind of a roustabout guy who was looking for opportunities. And they opened up the Oklahoma Territory, and if you got there quickly, you could stake a claim for property. Like maybe you get 5 acres or 10 acres or 50 acres. They just opened it up. So he raced out there and did it. There were covered wagons and there were horses and teams. I don't know how he got there, but he staked a claim. The guy with the claim next to him, not yet famous, was Will Rogers. But Joe Keaton was not even in show business. The first thing he did in show business was to be a kind of a stagehand with a medicine show where they sold snake oil, and the stuff just had a little tiny bit of alcohol in it and was supposed to cure anything. Well, his job was probably to set up the stage, load up the stuff, put it on the truck again or on the wagon, whatever it was, and maybe be a shill. And when the audience was gathering and he told them the miraculous cures, the guy would say, well, I have a sore throat, will it cure that? He'll say, here, have a sample. And he would take a sample and say, yeah, that feels better already. Okay, folks, for a thin dime, it can be yours. And that was a shill that they often had. Yeah. Sometimes they get the town drunk to do it, to something like that.
Right.
But then he fell in love with the proprietor's daughter, who was Keaton's mother. Myra, is that her name? Keaton's wife. Keaton's mother.
I can't recall.
Yeah, Keaton's mother. And he traveled with them, and then he fell in love and he married her. So now they were a team, and he knew something about the snake oil business. So the next thing he was in, Joe Keaton, was the Houdini Keaton medicine show. And they were traveling through Kansas, and Buster was born.
Right.
They left him there for a few days with his mother, Pickaway, Kansas. They went on, and the family caught up with them. But I thought it was so interesting. His father even went out to in 1849, he even went out to the gold rush to see if he could cash in on that. But he didn't find any gold and ran out of money and came back home. That he was a kind of a real opportunist guy.
Right. He's always, to see him in Keaton's films, he brings kind of a joy. Joe Keaton does. He brings kind of a joy to those roles.
Well, he has energy.
Yeah, and it has always made me wonder about him and Buster's relationship.
Yeah. Well, it couldn't have been fabulous because look how he utilized Buster. I mean, he threw him around the stage like a bowling ball.
Right.
Like they did have a tetherball idea where there was a rope and a center pole, and it kept going round and round, and Buster would duck it and then have it knock him into behind and flip him backwards. Wow. He would do anything to get a laugh. It was called the human mop sometimes in the act. But Joe Keaton's big talent was he had long legs, and he could kick a man's hat off. And that's probably what got him in show business.
Huh.
I never thought he was a great, actor or anything.
Sure.
But he certainly, I think Buster, if you'll think about the jokes, the physical jokes that Buster put in his films, he must have started understanding jokes, physical jokes, very, very early on. And he probably helped really create the act, he was probably the brains of it by the time he was 6 years old.
Sure, absolutely.
Started when he was 3 or 4.
Yeah,
amazing.
That's fascinating.
At one time in my life, I went to a long weekend with friends at Lake Arrowhead here. They had this lake house. I met Jim Caron. And when I found out he knew Buster and was a friend of his, I spent that whole weekend bending his ear for information. He was a busy actor. Everybody knew him. He was a good character actor. And he also had produced a summer show that Buster toured around the country in when he was in the 70s or something, called Merton of the Movies by Kaufman and Hart, I believe. The hero of the thing is a guy who's maybe 25 who wants to be in the silent movies. Well, he was 75, but he loved Buster so much, he just adapted the whole thing to a guy Buster's age breaking into the movies. So he probably added a ton of physical comedy, and he toured the country at one point in the summer working with Jim Caron. Then Caron used to go to his house out in Woodland Hills, I believe, and play bridge with him and spend the weekends out there. And I must tell you this because it broke my heart. I cried when I heard about it. They were out there one time in the backyard, and they hear a horn beeping in the front yard in his retirement home. When he got the money to buy that home when they made the Buster Keaton story with Donald O'Connor. And they go out, and it's a white limousine, and out of the limousine comes Jacques Tati. And we both know he is like, of the later people, even in sound, who was a silent movie comedian. He barely spoke. So he came out, he spoke French. Buster and Jim didn't speak French. He didn't speak English. And he goes on, and one could assume he's saying, when I was a little boy, I watched you. I wanted to become a comedian or an actor. And he embraced him, kissed him on both cheeks, got into the limo and left. And I told a crowd once at the Egyptian Theater, while we're watching Buster movies, about that, and I had tears in my eyes. Because Tati was me, going to see Buster.
Yeah.
And most people don't remember him, but I mean, in the genealogy of great silent people, he's one of them. And later, my friend Bill Irwin, who was in Popeye with me, who became a great clown, and he's in the tradition of those great masters. There are not many of them. But I was just thinking recently, Michael Richards from the Seinfeld show is pretty darn close.
Yeah.
I mean, he's really brilliantly funny with his body and his voice.
I agree. Yeah.
So it's like every 25 years or something, someone comes along who has that. In the old days, aside from the great masters, around the time of silent movies beginning, there were a great many vaudevillians who were also equally skilled physically, who could do great mime and great physical comedy. A lot of, I did a one-man show. I talked a lot about Buster, about my career, it was very funny, had a lot of comedy, many film clips, many still pictures. And I found out a block away from the theater I was doing, it was Buster's old studio on Lillian Way. Mm-hmm. I felt, wow, this is weird. I'm so connected to him, and I'm now talking about him on stage a block away from where he had a studio. Then this stage manager told me the very building we were in, where the theater is, in the Hollywood Fringe Festival, also had an office away from his lot where Buster came there to have an office. And he also said some people who have worked in that theater for a long time, this kind of small theater, would say they saw the ghost or thought about the ghost or felt the ghost of Buster Keaton. And I kind of think I felt that. And I kind of think, why am I, this kid from West Virginia, so fixated on this period of time? And I thought it might be possible that in another life, I might have known him. I actually feel that. And my father, I never saw my father laugh or smile. And guess what? I idolize this comedian who never does either one of those.
Yeah,
real connection there. I even play parts in the movies based on my father. Serious guys are a little grumpy, maybe with a heart of gold sometimes.
Yeah.
But I don't laugh or smile much when I'm acting. There's a lineology, there's a connection between me and my father and me and Buster and the way I play parts in my shows.
I can see that. That comes through loud and clear in your work.
Yeah. A lot of people.
You know what I love you in? I love you in A Mighty Wind. The scene where you're everyone's playing their instruments and you're playing the guitar, but you're not really playing the guitar.
That's right.
That cracks me up.
Jeff said to me, he called me into his office and he said, do you sing? I said, no, not very well. He said, do you play an instrument? I said, no. He said, well, I still want you to be in this. You'll be in the new Main Street Singers, and you'll hold the guitar and not play it. And I actually shot a scene which was edited out where I explained it. I said, once we were playing a gig in Boston, we all went out for Italian food, and I spilled spaghetti sauce on my only white shirt. And I didn't know what to do. And we all had dressed the same. And one of the other musicians said, there's an extra guitar here, hold it in front of you, and you'll cover the spaghetti sauce, but you don't have to play it. And I would just lean on it,
Right.
We did a tour afterwards to the major cities with all major cities of the Mighty Wind, of all those different groups.
Yeah.
We played in 7 or 8 big cities, New York, LA, and all that.
Okay.
And I asked the prop man once can you buy me a cheap guitar? He said, I can get you one for $25, secondhand store. So at the end of it, I broke it on stage over my chair. I didn't tell anyone I was going to do it. And I thought it was really funny. And when the cast used to throw out their guitar picks that had the name of the character on it, to the audience, which is done, I guess, in concerts. I had one with my name on it, but I never used it. But I threw it to the audience.
Right.
I have a lot of fun with that. My favorite moment is in Guffman, where I'm talking about being abducted on a spaceship and being probed innumerable times by people.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to watch that movie again. It's been 10 or 15.
It's only a minute, but it's quite funny.
That is.
It almost sounds like not an actor. I purposely hem and haw like I was a townsperson.
Right.
Starting sentences and stopping, and it's very realistic of a guy who not an actor. But that was fun for me. And of course, Larry David and Chris Guest lets us improvise, and so we feel like authors and feel like writers and performers when we work at that.
Yeah.
My original work was with Alan Arkin in the way back in the Second City Company. He was in the company I joined way back in the early 60s. But I've had a good experience, and I love comedy, and now I love drama too.
Well, thanks again, Paul. I could talk to you all night, but that's about all the time we have.
If you ever get lonely, and you might, call me up. We'll talk more.
Okay, I have your number now, so I may take you up on that.
Take care.
Just a reminder before we sign off to all our viewers, if you enjoyed tonight's performance and Q&A, please consider making a suggested donation of $7 to Retroformat by visiting retroformat.org/donate. I'd like to once again thank our guest, Paul Dooley, and we look forward to seeing all of you in 2 weeks for the next installment of Retroformat Live. I'm Sean P. Malone. Good night, everyone.